Narrator, calm, reflective tone. They say every house has a story. Some are about love, some about loss. And some are about the kind of silence that watches you when you sleep. When I bought the house on 9th Street, I thought I was buying peace. A quiet place in a loud city. Somewhere I could finally breathe again. But peace isn't cheap. And sometimes, it doesn't even exist. Narrator. I moved in at the start of the month. The place was half renovated. Cracked walls, peeling paint, loose wires hanging from the ceiling. It had been abandoned for nearly 3 years. The previous owners were family friends, good people, who had left the country in a hurry and needed money fast. So I got it for half its value. Right in the heart of the capital. A fixer-upper, sure. But I've always liked broken things. The first time I stepped inside, the air was thick. Not with dust, but with something heavier. You can always tell when a place has been empty for too long. It doesn't smell dead, it smells forgotten. Narrator Dental. There was no proper lock on the front door, just an old padlock. No gate either. Anyone could just walk in off the street if they wanted. That should have been my first warning. The very next morning I found a motorcycle parked inside my garage. Not mine, I don't even own one. Just standing there like it belonged. I asked the workers if it was theirs. They shook their heads. So I pushed it out onto the street and went about my day. Sound, knocking on metal gate, distant voices. That evening someone was banging on my gate hard. I didn't answer. From the upstairs window, I could see a man pacing outside. Angry, muttering something I couldn't make out. He waited for 15 minutes before finally leaving. But not before slamming his hand against the gate one last time. That night I realized something. This wasn't just a bad neighborhood. It was territory. Days passed. I got my gate installed, a few repairs done, and tried to make the house feel like mine. But the house didn't feel like it wanted to belong. There were small things at first. People peering through the gate. Children tossing stones at my dogs. The mailman avoiding the front porch like it was cursed. And then, there was my next-door neighbor. Narrator, low tone. Old man. Thin. Always wore the same faded white shirt. He lived alone on the ground floor of a 3-story house. And rented out the top 2 to tenants. He had this way of staring. Not like he was curious, but like he was taking inventory of your soul. I caught him watching me one morning while I watered my plants. He didn't look away. Didn't even blink. Just smiled. That kind of smile you can't read. Half friendly, half warning. Sound, kettle boiling, soft rain outside. A week after that I started noticing something odd. The water pressure in my taps kept dropping randomly. Sometimes for just a few minutes. Other times for hours. I thought it was a plumbing issue. Called a plumber twice. He checked everything. No leaks, no blockages. But still, the problem persisted. Then one night while I was showering, I heard a faint hum coming from next door. A mechanical sound. Like a pump. Narrator, quiet, suspicious. At first I didn't think much of it. But every time that hum started, my water pressure dropped. Every single time. Coincidence? Maybe. But something about it felt too deliberate. So I tested it. I filled my tank one evening. Waited until his pump turned on. And then turned on my taps. The water slowed to a trickle. When the hum stopped, came back. I did it again. And again. Same result. Narrator, reflective. It hit me then. The reason the bills had been so high even when the house was empty. He'd been stealing water from this property. Maybe he thought no one would ever move in again. Maybe he thought it didn't matter. But he was siphoning water. My water. Through a line buried God knows where. I wanted to confront him. But how do you accuse someone when you can't even see the proof? So I waited. Sound. Quiet clock ticking, distant traffic fades. The days that followed were calm. Too calm. That kind of silence that feels like it's waiting for something to happen. And in that silence, I started to notice other things. A flicker of light in his backyard around midnight. The faint smell of burning wires. The sound of footsteps on gravel when I knew I was alone. Sometimes I'd wake up and find my gate slightly open. As if someone had tried to peek in but lost their nerve. The dogs would bark at shadows I couldn't see. And that old man. He'd smile at me every morning like nothing had happened. Narrator, softer, uneasy. I told myself it was nothing. That I was overthinking. That maybe city life had finally gotten to me. But deep down, I knew better. I could feel it in my bones. That house, my house, was still connected to his in ways I hadn't yet understood. And it wasn't just through the water pipes. Narrator, calm, dark tone. That was the first month. And even now when I look back, I realize the house had been trying to tell me something all along. The creaks, the hums, the flickering lights. It was warning me that not everything that looks abandoned has truly been left behind. Narrator, final line of part 1, slow and reflective. I moved into a house that wasn't mine yet. There's some ghost. Don't wear white sheets. Some live right next door. Narrator, calm, introspective tone. Strange how quickly a place starts to feel like a person. The house on 9th Street had moods. Some days warm, some days cold. And lately it felt like it was holding its breath. Every time I walked through those narrow corridors, I felt watched, not by ghosts but by time itself. Like the walls remembered things that I didn't. And the man next door, he seemed to remember them too. Sound, creaking chair, faint radio playing an old tune next door. Narrator, quietly. I started seeing him more often. He'd sit outside his gate every evening, on a plastic chair that looked older than both our houses combined. Sometimes he'd whistle, sometimes just stare at passing cars. Never said a word to me. Not a greeting. Not a nod. Nothing. Just that look. Cold, careful, calculating. Sound, kettle whistling softly. Narrator. One morning I went to the corner shop to grab tea. The shopkeeper, an old man with cracked glasses, asked me, "How's life in the haunted house?" I laughed thinking he was joking. But he wasn't smiling. He told me that the house had been empty for years. But every once in a while people saw lights flicker inside. And always, it came from the pipes. Pipes? I asked. He nodded. They run under both houses. Built before the city expanded. They say the water never stopped flowing, even when no one lived there. Sound, faint hum of motor starting, water dripping. Narrator, suspicious tone. That night I heard his water pump again. That same rhythmic hum, steady and smug. I stepped outside, stood near my boundary wall, and pressed my ear against the concrete. The vibration was there, clear as a heartbeat. It wasn't just water moving. It was mine. Sound, footsteps walking around backyard. Narrator. Over the next few nights, I started mapping the sound. Each time the pump came on, I'd mark where the vibration felt strongest. I found it. A small rusted pipe that came out from under the wall, painted over so many times it blended with the ground. It connected both houses. It had been there long before either of us moved in. And that's how he'd been stealing water. Quietly, cleverly for years. Narrator, reflective. The realization didn't make me angry at first. It made me tired. Tired of people like him. People who take what isn't theirs, then look at you like you're the thief for noticing. I didn't tell anyone. Not the police, not my friends. I just kept watching. And every day, he acted like he didn't know what I knew. Feeding pigeons in the morning. Fixing his tenants' bikes. Pretending to be the harmless old man next door. But his eyes told a different story. Narrator, lower, darker tone. Sometimes at night, I catch him standing near his window, just staring into my yard. No light, no sound. Just that silhouette framed in darkness. It was like he knew I was watching him too. One night I whispered, "What do you want?" He didn't answer. Just closed the curtains. Narrator, soft, emotional. The thing about loneliness is, it makes you start hearing things, or maybe noticing things you always ignored. Like the sound of dripping water in the middle of the night. Or the way the lights flickered when his pump turned on. Or how my dogs would growl at the kitchen wall. The one that connected to his. Something was moving through those pipes. Not just water, something else. Something unseen. And unsettling. Narrator. I started dreaming of water. Every night it filled my house. Pouring from the walls, flooding the floor. And in those dreams, I'd see him, standing waist deep in it, smiling. When I woke up the house would be silent again. But the air heavy. Like the dream hadn't ended yet. Narrator, low, steady tone. That's when I decided I had to do something. I couldn't just sit there, paying for his comfort, while he used me like a well that would never run dry. But I didn't want a fight. I didn't want police or drama or neighborhood gossip. I wanted justice, quiet and clean. So I began planning. Narrator, come. I learned his schedule. When he left home, When the tenants came and went. When his pump turned on and off. Every detail mattered. I realized he always ran the pump late at night. Around 11:30, sometimes midnight. That's when the city's supply pressure drops. And he could pull more water without anyone noticing. He thought he was clever. He thought I wouldn't find out. He was wrong. Narrator, calm but cold. All it would take was one turn. One twist of a valve. And the water that kept him comfortable would become the thing that broke him. But revenge isn't about anger. It's about patience. And I was patient. Narrator. I waited, listening to the hum of his pump echo through the wall. Like a countdown. Because the next time that sound started, I wouldn't be the one losing water. He would. Narrator, low reflective tone. You never really know how far people will go until they think they can get away with something. That's what I kept thinking about my neighbor. The way he smiled each morning, polite, predictable, and then stole from me at night. But I didn't want to guess anymore. I wanted proof. Narrator, calm, patient tone. So I became an investigator. I started small. A wrench, a flashlight, and a few hours of quiet observation. I traced every visible pipe in my yard, marked them with tape, and turned them on and off, listening for that hum from next door. Each night the pattern was the same. When my valve opened, silence. When his pump started, vibration. And that vibration meant one thing. He was pulling water directly from my line. Narrator, slightly whispering. At first I wondered how long he'd been doing this. The house had been empty for nearly 3 years. No one around to notice. He must have thought it was a blessing. Free water, no questions, no guilt. But guilt has a way of finding you. It flows through life like a current. Slow, steady, unstoppable. Just like water. Narrator, calmly. I remember sitting by my window that week, watching the lights in his house flicker behind half-drawn curtains. He had a routine. Dinner at 8. Pump at 11:30. Lights out at midnight. He was nothing if not predictable. So predictable, I could set my watch by him. Narrator. I wrote everything down. Times, sounds, weather, even how long his pump ran. If I was going to act, I wanted to be sure. Completely sure. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. The kind of justice that doesn't need a court. Narrator, reflective. That Friday night I stood by the valve. The main control that fed both our houses. It was an old brass piece, stuck into the ground like a relic. A simple turn of it would shut off the flow entirely. I ran my thumb across the cold metal, and thought of how many times he'd probably walked past his pump, hearing it hum, never realizing that every drop came from someone else's home. Sound, faint footsteps in mud, light wind. Narrator. But I didn't turn it yet. Not that night. I wanted him to take a little more. To get comfortable. To feel untouchable. Because the thing about taking too much is that one day, you end up taking from the wrong person. Narrator, softer tone. I started noticing his tenants too. 2 families, both renting the top floors. Nice people, a young couple on the second, and a small family with 2 kids on the third. They didn't know what their landlord was doing. Why would they? They just paid rent. While he sat downstairs living off everyone's supply. And it hit me then. He wasn't just stealing from me. He was stealing from them too. Narrator, sighs. I wanted to feel bad for what I was planning. But I didn't. I tried ignoring it. I tried patience. And yet every time that pump came on, I felt the pressure drop. In my pipes and in my chest. It wasn't just water anymore. It was pride. And mine had run dry. Sound, soft ticking clock. Narrator, low, serious tone. So I made my move. Saturday night. I left my dogs inside. Sat near the window with the lights off. And waited. At 11:34 p.m. The sound came. That low hum through the wall. Rattling the glass just slightly. His pump was running. I stood up. Put on my raincoat. And stepped outside. Narrator, steady voice. The air smelled of rain and rust. Streetlights flickered weakly. Yellow dying halos in the mist. I walked to the valve box near the wall. Lifted the lid. And looked down. It was glowing faintly under my flashlight. A single twist away from silence. And I smiled. Narrator, calm, cold tone. I turned it. Slowly, carefully. Until the vibration under my feet stopped. Then there was quiet. The kind of quiet that only comes when something you've been waiting for finally begins. Narrator, reflective. I knew what would happen. Without water, his pump would keep running. Pumps aren't built for thirst. They burn when starved. And his wiring, old, ancient, brittle, wouldn't survive the night. I went back inside, made myself tea, and sat by the window. The hum continued, fainter with each passing minute, until finally, there was nothing. Just rain. Narrator quietly. It was done. But I didn't feel satisfied. Not yet. Because revenge isn't instant. So, it seeps through the cracks, like water through concrete. And that night, I could feel it. The beginning of a storm. Not outside, but inside him. Narrator, calm, cold tone. There's something almost sacred about silence after revenge begins. The world doesn't explode. It exhales. That night, after turning the valve, I sat in my living room with all the lights off. Just me, the rain, and the faint hum of a dying motor next door. Each second that passed was another drop of truth falling through the cracks. Narrator softly. At first it was steady, the usual whir. Then it grew louder, desperate, uneven. A choking sound, like a beast realizing it's been starved too long. I could picture him pacing in his little basement, tapping the pipes, checking the switches, wondering why the tank wasn't filling. But he wouldn't know. Not yet. Narrator reflective. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. And still, that motor kept grinding. The sound became part of the storm, blending with the thunder, beating against the walls. I could feel the vibration under my floor. It wasn't just water anymore. It was energy, heat, friction. And I knew what came next. Narrator, low tone. By 2:30 in the morning, the sound had changed. It wasn't a hum anymore. It was a scream. You could hear the metal straining, the pump trying to pull something that wasn't there. That's when the lights in his house flickered. One by one they died. The entire building went black. Then came the shouting. Narrator, come. I sat by my window and listened. His tenants, 2 families, had woken up to darkness and silence. You could hear confusion turning into anger. Voices rising through the storm. Why is there no water? Why did the power go out? Where's the landlord? Their silhouettes moved through candlelight, shadows against broken glass. The old man stumbled outside, his flashlight shaking in the rain. Narrator softly. He looked up and down the street, as if the whole neighborhood had betrayed him. But it wasn't the street. It was just me. He ran to the main switchboard, bare feet slipping in mud, fumbling with wires and fuses. Every spark that jumped was a reminder. Karma travels fast through copper. Narrator quiet. Then it happened. Tangle flash. Bright enough to light up the entire lane for a second. And then nothing. No bump. No light. No sound. Just rain. Narrator reflective. From my window, I could see him collapse to his knees, hands buried in his face. The tenants shouted something. A name, a threat, a demand. But he didn't answer. They went back inside, slamming doors, cursing the night. And there he stayed. Old, soaked, defeated, under the same rain that once filled his tanks. Narrator somber. Around 3 a.m., the whole street was quiet again. Only the occasional rumble of thunder. And the smell of wet soil. I made myself coffee, and sat near the window. The rain hit the glass in perfect rhythm. Top, top, top. Like the world keeping time with his regret. And for the first time since I moved in, the house felt calm, balanced. Narrator gentle, almost sad. When the sun rose, the neighborhood woke to whispers. Everyone talking about the power surge that burned through the old man's wiring overnight. The tenants packed their things that day. They didn't shout anymore. They didn't even look at him. By noon, both families were gone. And the house next door, silent. Narrator low, reflective. That afternoon, he came to my gate. His shirt soaked, hands trembling, eyes red. Like someone who hadn't slept in days. He looked at me and asked, quietly, "Did you turn off your water?" I smiled. "Oh yeah," I said. "My plumber found a leak. Had to shut it for a night." He stared for a moment. Didn't blink. Didn't smile. Just nodded once. Then he turned and walked away. Slowly, like a man carrying the weight of his own mistakes. Narrator emotional. I didn't see him again for days. But I noticed something. His chair outside, the one he always sat in, was gone. And for the first time, his window stayed closed. Narrator closing part 4. Revenge doesn't roar. It whispers. It seeps quietly through the cracks, until it fills every hollow space left by arrogance. And that night, it flowed through wires, through pipes, through pride, until it found him. Narrator, calm, reflective tone. The morning after the storm was quiet. Too quiet. No hums, no shouts, no restless noises from next door. Only the sound of dripping water from the eaves. And the faint smell of burned wire drifting through the street. It felt peaceful. But not the kind of peace you celebrate. The kind that feels heavy. Earned, not gifted. Narrator. I made myself tea and stood by the gate. Across the road, the old man's house looked hollow. Curtains closed. Door shut. No signs of life. For the first time since I'd moved in, I realized how different silence feels. When it's no longer threatening. Just empty. He wasn't outside in his chair. His tenants were gone. Even the pigeons that used to flock to his wall had found another roof. The house stood still, like a shell that once held a storm. Sound, slow footsteps on gravel. Narrator softly. Later that day I saw a moving van outside. 2 men loading boxes. Old furniture, a fan, some broken appliances. And then him. The old man. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even defeated. He just looked tired. Like someone who had finally run out of excuses. He spoke briefly to the movers. Locked his door. And without looking at me. Walked away. Narrator, gentle tone. That was the last time I saw him. The neighbors said he moved in with his daughter. Some said he couldn't afford the fines. Others said he didn't want to live alone anymore. Whatever the reason, he was gone. And with him, the tension that had hung between our houses for weeks. The night after he left, I slept deeply for the first time in months. No dreams. No dripping. No hums. Just rain. Soft, distant, harmless. Narrator, reflective. Over the next few days, I had a plumber come in. We cut and sealed every pipe that crossed my boundary. Removed every trace of the old connections. When the work was done, I stood in my backyard and watched the water flow from the new tap. Clear, steady, strong. For a moment I just listened. That sound, the steady rush of clean water, wasn't just plumbing anymore. It was peace. Narrator, gentle, thoughtful. People say revenge is poison. That it eats you from the inside. Maybe they're right. But sometimes, it's not about hate. It's about balance. When someone tilts your world, you don't destroy them. You just restore the weight. And that's what I did. I restored balance. Narrator, slightly emotional. A few weeks later, I heard from the shopkeeper down the street that the old man's daughter sold the house. A young couple bought it. New beginnings, fresh paint, new locks, new life. And as strange as it sounds, I hope they never found out what happened there. Some stories are better left buried in the rain. Narrator, soft voice. Now when I walk through my own house, it feels lighter. The air no longer hums with tension. The walls no longer whisper. Even the dogs sleep soundly. I planted a small tree by the wall we once shared. It's growing slowly, reaching toward the sky. Its roots drinking clean water. Funny how something new can grow from something that once went dry. Narrator, final reflection. I still think about him sometimes. About that night. About the silence that followed. Maybe he learned something too. Maybe he didn't. But I did. Justice doesn't always come from law or order. Sometimes it comes quietly. In the form of a choice. A turn of a valve. A lesson written not in words, but in consequences. Narrator, final line, warm, calm. And if that old house on 9th Street could speak today, I think it would say what I finally learned. Peace doesn't come when things stop happening. It comes when you stop letting them happen.